The morning started like any other for Tom Bradley. He rolled out of bed at 5:30 a.m., same as he had for the past 3 years. The old ranch house felt too quiet, too empty. But that's how things were now. He'd gotten used to it, or at least that's what he told himself every morning when he looked at the empty coffee cup sitting next to his on the kitchen counter. Tom pulled on his worn boots and grabbed his jacket from the hook by the door. October mornings in Montana could bite right through you if you weren't careful. The wind was picking up and he could smell snow in the air. Winter was coming early this year. He stepped outside and took a deep breath. The fresh air always helped clear his head. 3 years ago, when Linda got sick, he never thought he'd be running this place alone. She was the one who loved the animals, especially the horses. She'd spend hours in the barn, talking to them like they were old friends. Now it was just him and 20 head of cattle, 4 horses, and way too much silence. Tom walked across the yard toward the barn. His boots crunched on the frost-covered grass. The sun wasn't up yet, but there was enough light to see where he was going. He had to check on Buttercup, his oldest mare. She was pregnant and due any day now. Linda always said animals picked. The worst times to have their babies, usually in the middle of storms or at 3 in the morning. As he got closer to the barn, something felt different. He couldn't put his finger on it, but after 30 years of ranch life, you develop a sense for when things aren't quite right. Maybe it was the way the horses were acting. Usually they'd whinny when they heard him coming. Today, they were quiet. Tom reached for the barn door handle and paused. Was that a sound from inside? He listened carefully. Nothing but the wind rattling the old tin roof. He shook his head and pulled the door open. The smell of hay and horses filled his nose. Familiar and comforting. He flicked on the light switch, and the single bulb hanging from the ceiling cast long shadows across the barn. Everything looked normal at first glance. The 4 horses were in their stalls, alert but calm. Buttercup stood near the back of her stall, her belly round and heavy. Then he saw it. In the corner of Buttercup's stall, curled up in a pile of clean hay, was a small bundle wrapped in what looked like an old pink blanket. Tom's heart skipped a beat. He blinked hard, thinking maybe he was seeing things, but no, it was real. It was a child. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, was fast asleep in his barn. Her dark hair was tangled and dirty, and her clothes looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks. She was clutching something small against her chest. As Tom got closer, he could see it was a stuffed animal, a little brown bear that had definitely seen better days. Buttercup stood over the girl like a guard dog, or in this case, a guard horse. The mare's ears were forward, alert but not alarmed. It was almost like she was protecting the child. Tom had no idea what to do. He'd never been around kids much. He and Linda had tried for years to have children, but it just never happened. Now here was this little girl sleeping in his barn like she belonged there. He knelt down slowly, not wanting to scare her. Up close, he could see how thin she was. Her cheeks were hollow and there were dark circles under her eyes. Whatever had brought her here, it hadn't been easy. "Hey there, sweetheart," Tom said softly. "Wake up now." The girl's eyes fluttered open. They were the most beautiful green eyes Tom had ever seen, bright and clear despite everything else about her that looked tired and worn down. For a moment, she just stared at him, not moving, not speaking. Then she sat up quickly, clutching her teddy bear tighter. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I was just so cold and she—" The girl pointed at Buttercup. "She let me sleep here. I'll go now, I promise." She started to scramble to her feet, but Tom held up his hand. "Hold on there, little one. Nobody's in trouble here. What's your name?" The girl hesitated, like she wasn't sure if she should answer. "Lucy," she finally said. "Well, Lucy, I'm Tom. This is my barn, and that's Buttercup you've been sleeping with. Looks like she took a liking to you." Tom smiled, trying to look as non-threatening as possible. "When's the last time you ate something?" Lucy's stomach answered for her, rumbling loudly in the quiet barn. She wrapped her arms around her middle, embarrassed. "Tell you what," Tom said, standing up slowly. "How about we go up to the house and get you some breakfast? Then we can figure out what's what." Lucy looked uncertain. She glanced at Buttercup, then back at Tom. "You're not going to call the police?" The question hit Tom like a punch to the gut. This little girl was clearly running from something, and she was scared. Whatever had happened to her, whoever had hurt her, they'd done a good job of making her afraid of adults. "Nobody's calling anybody right now," Tom said. "Right now we're just going to get you some food and warm clothes. That sound okay?" Lucy nodded slowly. She stood up, and Tom could see just how small and fragile she really was. Her clothes were way too big for her, like they'd been meant for someone else. Her shoes had holes in them, and he could see her toes poking through as they walked toward the house. Lucy kept looking back at the barn. "Is Buttercup going to be okay?" She seemed worried about something. Tom smiled. This kid had been sleeping rough probably for days or weeks, and she was worried about his horse. "Buttercup's fine. She's going to have a baby soon, that's all. Probably in the next day or two." Lucy's eyes lit up. "Really? Can I see the baby? When it comes?" "We'll see," Tom said, though something in his chest was already telling him this little girl might be around for a while. When they reached the house, Tom realized he had no idea how to take care of a child. What did kids eat for breakfast? What size clothes would fit her? He'd been living alone for so long he'd forgotten how to think about anyone else's needs. But as he watched Lucy's face light up when she saw the warm, bright kitchen, he knew he was going to figure it out. Something about this little girl had already gotten under his skin. Maybe it was the way she'd worried about Buttercup, or the way she'd apologized for sleeping in his barn like it was some kind of crime. Or maybe it was just that the house had been quiet for too long, and Lucy's voice, even as scared and small as it was, made the place feel alive again. Tom didn't know it yet, but finding Lucy in his barn was going to change everything. Not just for her, but for him too. Sometimes the best things in life come when you least expect them. Wrapped in old blankets and sleeping in the hay, Tom opened the kitchen cabinet, suddenly realizing he had no idea what a 6-year-old girl would want to eat. His usual breakfast was black coffee and whatever leftovers he could find in the fridge. That probably wasn't going to work for Lucy. "How about some eggs?" he asked, pulling a carton from the refrigerator. "And maybe some toast?" Lucy nodded, perched on the edge of a kitchen chair like she was ready to run at any moment. She still clutched her teddy bear, and Tom noticed her eyes darting around the room, taking in every detail. She was checking for exits, he realized. This kid had learned to always have an escape plan. As Tom cracked eggs into a pan, he tried to think of what to say. He'd never been much of a talker, especially with kids, but Lucy looked like she needed someone to be gentle with her. "That's a nice bear you've got there," he said, nodding toward the stuffed animal. "What's his name?" "Mr. Patches," Lucy said quietly. "My mama gave him to me when I was little." "Where's your mama now?" Tom asked, immediately regretting it when he saw Lucy's face shut down. "She's gone," Lucy said, her voice flat. She didn't offer any more details, and Tom didn't push. The eggs sizzled in the pan while Tom made toast. He could feel Lucy watching, his every move. When he set the plate in front of her, she stared at it for a moment like she couldn't believe it was real. "Go ahead," Tom said. "Eat up." Lucy picked up the fork with both hands and started eating. Tom had never seen anyone eat so carefully, like each bite was precious. She cleaned the entire plate without saying a word, then looked up at him with those big green eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're welcome. You want some more?" Lucy shook her head, but Tom could tell she was still hungry. Pride, maybe, or fear of asking for too much. He'd seen that look before in injured animals. Grateful but wary, never sure when the kindness might run out. After breakfast, Tom called the sheriff's office. He had to report finding a lost child. That was just common sense. But when Deputy Martinez arrived an hour later, Lucy hid behind Tom's legs like a scared puppy. "No missing child reports matching her description," Martinez said after making some calls. "Social services is backed up, but they'll send someone out in a day or two to figure out next steps." After the deputy left, Tom found Lucy back in the barn, sitting cross-legged in front of Buttercup's stall. The mare had her head down near the girl, and Lucy was talking to her in a soft voice. "She says her baby is coming soon. Lucy told Tom when he walked up. She's excited but nervous. Tom smiled. How do you know what she's saying? Animals talk different than people, but they still talk. You just have to listen right. Lucy reached through the stall bars to pat Buttercup's nose. She says thank you for letting me sleep here last night. She was lonely too. Over the next few days, Lucy slowly started to open up. She helped Tom with the morning chores, carrying buckets of feed that were almost as big as she was. She had a natural way with the animals that reminded Tom of Linda. The barn cats followed her around like she was their queen, and even the cattle seemed calmer when she was near. But Lucy still jumped at loud noises and flinched if Tom moved too quickly. She slept in the guest room but always kept the door cracked open. Tom could hear her talking to Mr. Patches in the middle of the night, quiet conversations about things he couldn't quite make out. On her third day there, Tom found Lucy sitting on the porch steps staring down the long driveway. Waiting for someone? He asked, settling down beside her. Just making sure nobody's coming, Lucy said. Sometimes bad people follow you, even when you think you got away. Tom's heart broke, a little more. What kind of bad people, sweetheart? Lucy was quiet for a long time. Then she said, people who hurt kids, people who say they'll take care of you but they don't really mean it. Tom wanted to ask more, but he could see Lucy was already regretting saying as much as she had. Instead, he just sat with her in comfortable silence, watching the sun set behind the mountains. That night, Buttercup went into labor. Tom was checking on her around midnight when he heard footsteps behind him. Lucy appeared in her pajamas, rubbing sleepy eyes. Is it time? She asked. Tom nodded. Want to watch? It might take a while. Lucy's face lit up with excitement. They sat together on hay bales outside Buttercup's stall, waiting. Tom had seen plenty of foals born over the years, but watching Lucy's face made it feel like the first time. When the baby finally arrived, a little chestnut filly with white markings, Lucy gasped with wonder. She's perfect, Lucy breathed. What's her name going to be? Tom thought for a moment. Why don't you name her? Lucy's eyes went wide. Really? I can pick? Sure can. Lucy watched the wobbly-legged filly try to stand up, her mother nickering encouragement. Hope, she said finally. Her name is Hope. It was a perfect name, Tom thought. Hope for new beginnings, hope for better days ahead. The next morning, social, worker Beth Williams arrived to assess the situation. She was a kind woman in her 50s who'd been working with kids for 20 years. She took one look at Lucy, clean, fed, helping Tom feed the chickens, and something in her expression softened. She looks good, Beth told Tom privately. Healthy, content, that's not always the case when we find kids who've been living rough. How long was she out there? Tom asked. Hard to say. Could be weeks, could be longer. Kids that age don't always have a good sense of time. But she trusts you, and that's saying something. Traumatized children don't usually warm up to adults so quickly. Beth spent the afternoon talking with Lucy, asking gentle questions about where she'd come from and how she'd ended up in Tom's barn. Lucy didn't say much, but she didn't hide either. She answered what she could and stayed quiet about the rest. Before Beth left, she pulled Tom aside. I'm going to recommend she stay here while we investigate her background. The foster system is overwhelmed right now, and she's clearly doing well with you. Think you can handle a little girl for a while longer? Tom looked through the kitchen window at Lucy, who was sitting in the yard with 3 barn cats in her lap telling them a story about Hope the filly. The sight made something warm spread through his chest. Yeah, he said. I think I can handle that. That evening, as Tom tucked Lucy into bed, she looked up at him with serious eyes. Tom, are you going to send me away when they find out about my mama? Tom sat down on the edge of the bed. What about your mama, sweetheart? She's dead, Lucy said matter-of-factly. Has been for a while now. I've been taking care of myself. The simple way she said it made Tom's throat tight. No child should have to say those words so calmly. Nobody's sending you anywhere right now, Tom said. You're safe here, okay? We'll figure out the rest as we go. Lucy nodded and hugged Mr. Patches closer. Tom, thank you for letting me stay, and thank you for letting me name Hope. Thank you for taking such good care of the animals, Tom said. They like having you around, so do I. As he turned off the light and headed toward his own room, Tom realized something had shifted in the house. It didn't feel empty anymore. Lucy's presence, her quiet voice talking to the animals, her small hands helping with chores, even her nightmares that sometimes woke him up, had filled spaces he didn't even know were hollow. For the first time, in 3 years, Tom Bradley felt like he had a purpose beyond just getting through each day. He had someone to take care of, someone who needed him, and maybe, just maybe, someone he was starting to need too. 3 weeks had passed since Tom found Lucy in his barn, and life had settled into a comfortable routine. Lucy helped with the morning chores, spent her afternoons with the animals, and every evening she'd sit by Hope's stall, telling the growing, filly stories about magical horses and brave princesses. The nightmares were getting less frequent, and Tom had even heard Lucy laugh a few times, a sound that made the old ranch house feel alive again. But Tom knew this peaceful time couldn't last forever. Beth Williams had been investigating Lucy's background, and sooner or later the truth would come out. He just wasn't prepared for how dark that truth would be. Beth arrived on a gray Tuesday morning, her usual warm smile replaced by a grim expression. She had a thick folder under her arm and the look of someone who'd seen too much of the world's ugliness. "We need to talk," she said, glancing toward Lucy, who was in the kitchen eating cereal and reading a book about horses that Tom had picked up in town. They sat in Tom's living room while Lucy stayed in the kitchen. Beth opened her folder and pulled out several official-looking documents. "We found Lucy's mother," Beth said quietly. "Her name was Carol Martinez. She died 2 months ago from a drug overdose in Denver." Tom felt his stomach drop. He'd suspected. Lucy's mother was gone, but hearing it confirmed was different. Does Lucy know? She knows her mother is dead. What she doesn't know is the whole story. Beth's voice got even quieter. Carol had been using drugs for years. Lost her job. Lost her apartment. She and Lucy had been living in shelters and on the streets for months before Carol died. Tom rubbed his face with his hands. No wonder Lucy was so good at taking care of herself. She'd been doing it for longer than any kid should have to. "There's more," Beth continued. "After Carol died, Lucy ended up with her mother's boyfriend, a man named Danny Cooper. He has a criminal record: assault, drug possession, theft, and—" Beth paused, choosing her words carefully. "And he's been known to exploit children in very bad ways." The words hit Tom like a physical blow. "You mean he—" "We don't know exactly what happened to Lucy while she was with him. She won't talk about it, and that's probably for the best right now. But she ran away from his house 6 weeks ago. Tom, this little girl walked almost 200 miles to get here, through 3 different counties, sleeping wherever she could, eating whatever she could find." Tom stared at the folder in Beth's hands, trying to process what he was hearing. Lucy, barely 7 years old, had walked 200 miles to escape. Something so terrible she'd rather risk dying alone on the road than stay. "Where's Danny now?" Tom asked, his voice harder than he'd intended. "Arrested last week on drug charges. He's in jail, but probably not for long. When he gets out—" Beth didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Tom looked toward the kitchen, where he could hear Lucy humming softly to herself. She sounded happy, content. The thought of anyone hurting her made his hands clench into fists. "What happens now?" he asked. "That's what we need to figure out. Lucy has no other family willing to take her. Her grandmother on her mother's side is in a nursing home with dementia. Her father's never been in the picture. She'll have to go into foster care." "What kind of foster care?" Beth sighed. "Honestly, the system is overwhelmed. Most families aren't equipped to handle a child with Lucy's trauma. She'll probably end up in a group home, at least initially, and with her history—" She trailed off again. "What about her history?" "Kids who've been through what Lucy's been through, they don't always adjust well to new situations. They have trust issues, behavioral problems, nightmares. A lot of foster families give up pretty quickly. Lucy could end up bouncing from home to home until she ages out of the system. Tom felt sick. The idea of Lucy, who was just starting to feel safe, being shipped off to live with strangers who might not understand, or protect her, it was unthinkable. "How long do I have?" he asked. "I'm trying to buy us some time, but probably not more than a week or two. Unless—" Beth looked at him carefully. "Unless you'd be interested in becoming a licensed foster parent." The suggestion hung in the air. Between them. Tom had been thinking about it, but hearing it said out loud made it real. Him, a foster parent. Him, responsible for a traumatized little girl who'd already been through more than most adults. "I don't know anything about raising kids," he said. "Nobody does when they start. But Lucy trusts you, and that's huge. She's thriving here, Tom. I've seen a lot of kids in situations like this, and usually they're withdrawn, angry, acting out. Lucy's different here. She feels safe." Before Tom could respond, Lucy appeared in the doorway. She was holding her empty cereal bowl and looking between Tom and Beth with worried eyes. "Are you talking about me?" she asked quietly. Beth smiled, but Tom could see the sadness behind it. "We're just figuring out some grown-up stuff, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about." But Lucy was too smart for that. She set her bowl down and walked over to Tom's chair, leaning against his arm the way she'd started doing when she was nervous. "Am I in trouble?" she asked. "No, baby, you're not in trouble," Tom said, putting his arm around her small shoulders. "Nobody's in trouble." "Then why do you both look sad?" Tom and Beth exchanged glances. "How do you explain to a 7-year-old that the world is full of people who want to hurt children? How do you tell her that the system designed to protect her might not be able to keep her safe?" "Lucy," Beth said gently, "we found out what happened to your mama. She got very sick and she died." "I'm sorry, sweetheart," Lucy nodded solemnly. "I know. I was there when it happened. She just went to sleep and didn't wake up." The casual way she said it broke Tom's heart all over again. This little girl had seen her mother die, had been alone with the body, and somehow she'd survived. She'd taken care of herself through things that would destroy most adults. "What about Danny?" Lucy asked, and Tom felt her stiffen against his arm. "He can't hurt you anymore," Beth said firmly. "He's in jail and he's never going to get near you again." For the first time since Beth had arrived, Lucy's face showed real emotion, relief, fear, and something that looked like hope all mixed together. "Does that mean I can stay here?" she asked, looking up at Tom with those big green eyes. Tom's throat felt tight. "We're working on it, sweetheart. But it might be complicated." "I don't want to go to another house," Lucy said quietly. "I like it here. The animals like me and I like taking care of them, and Hope needs me." As if she'd heard her name, Hope whinnied from the barn. Lucy's face lit up slightly. "Can I go check on her?" she asked. "Sure, baby. We'll be out in a few minutes." After Lucy left, Beth leaned forward in her chair. "Tom, I'm going to be straight with you. The foster care system is broken. Good families are hard to find, and kids like Lucy, kids with trauma, kids who've been through the worst kind of abuse, they're the hardest to place. She could spend years bouncing around, never feeling safe, never having a real home." Tom watched through the window as Lucy walked toward the barn, her small figure dwarfed by the big Montana sky. Buttercup and Hope were both at the fence waiting for her. The sight of them together, the little girl and the horses who'd already adopted her as their own, made something fierce and protective rise up in his chest. "What would I have to do?" he asked. "To become her foster parent, I mean." Beth's face brightened for the first time all morning. "Home study, background checks, training classes. It's a lot of paperwork and jumping through hoops, but nothing you couldn't handle. The question is, are you ready for what comes with it? Lucy's going to need therapy probably for years. She's going to have bad days, maybe really bad days. And there's no guarantee that fostering would lead to adoption. The state prefers to place kids with families, not single men." Tom thought about the past 3 weeks. Lucy's nightmares, her constant watchfulness, the way she hoarded food in her room like she wasn't sure where her next meal would come from. But he also thought about her laughter when Hope nuzzled her face, the way she sang to the barn cats, the peace that had settled over his house since she'd arrived. "She's already been through the worst," Tom said. "Whatever comes next, it can't be worse than what she's already survived. And at least here she knows she's safe." Beth smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "I was hoping you'd say that. I'll start the paperwork this afternoon." As they walked toward the barn to check on Lucy, Tom felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. Not just for Lucy, but for himself. He'd been drifting since Linda died, just going through the motions of living. Lucy had given him a reason to wake up in the morning, a purpose beyond just surviving each day. He found Lucy in Hope's stall, brushing the young horse's coat with gentle strokes. Both animals stood perfectly still, clearly enjoying the attention. "She's getting so big," Lucy said without looking up. "Buttercup says she's proud of how strong Hope is getting." "Buttercup told you that, did she?" Tom asked, smiling despite everything. "Animals don't lie," Lucy said seriously. "That's one of the best things about them." Tom watched her work, this remarkable little girl who'd walked 200 miles to find safety and ended up in his barn. Maybe it was fate, maybe it was just luck, but somehow Lucy had found her way to exactly where she needed to be. Now it was up to him to make sure she could stay. That night, Tom couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything Beth had told him. Lucy had walked 200 miles. 200 miles. When he was 7, he could barely walk to the end of his driveway without his mother worrying. But Lucy had somehow survived on her own for weeks, eating scraps, sleeping in abandoned buildings, hiding from people who might hurt her. Around midnight, he heard it, the soft whimpering that meant Lucy was having another nightmare. Tom had learned to recognize the sound over the past few weeks. Usually she'd settle back down on her own, but tonight the whimpering turned into quiet sobs. Tom got up and padded down the hall in his socks. Lucy's door was cracked open like always. She couldn't sleep with it completely closed. He could see her small form curled up in bed, clutching Mr. Patches and crying into her pillow. "Lucy?" he whispered. "You okay, sweetheart?" She sat up quickly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I'm sorry I woke you up." "You didn't wake me. I was already awake." Tom sat down on the edge of her bed. "Bad dream?" Lucy nodded, not trusting her voice. In the dim light from the hallway, Tom could see the fear still lingering in her eyes. "Want to talk about it?" "It was about Danny," she said quietly. "He found me and made me go back. And you weren't there to help me." Tom's heart clenched. "Lucy, look at me." She raised her eyes to his. "Danny is in jail. He can't hurt you anymore, and I'm not going anywhere. But what if they make me leave? What if I have to go live with strangers who don't like me?" The question hit Tom right in the gut, because that was exactly what might happen. Despite everything Beth had said about fostering, there were no guarantees. The system could decide he wasn't suitable, or Lucy could be placed with a family instead of a single man, or a dozen other things could go wrong. "Lucy, can I tell you something?" She nodded. "When I was about your age, my dad died in a ranch accident, just like you lost your mama. I was scared all the time, worried about what was going to happen to me and my mom. But you know what I learned?" "What?" "Sometimes when bad things happen, it opens up space for really good things to come in. If my dad hadn't died, my mom never would have met my stepdad, who turned out to be the best father a kid could ask for. And if you hadn't ended up in my barn that morning, I never would have met you." Lucy was quiet for a moment, processing this. "Are you glad you met me?" "Oh, sweetheart." Tom's voice got thick. "Meeting you has been the best thing that's happened to me in a very long time. This old house was way too quiet before you got here. Now it feels like a home again. Really. Really. You know what I was thinking about tonight? I was thinking about how to turn that empty room downstairs into a proper bedroom for you. Maybe paint it whatever color you want, get you a bigger bed, Put up some shelves for books. What do you think about that? Lucy's eyes went wide. You want me to stay? Like really stay? I want you to stay forever if you'll have me. I want to adopt you, Lucy. I want to be your dad. The words came out before Tom had really thought them through, but as soon as he said them, he knew they were true. Over the past 3 weeks, Lucy had become the daughter he'd never thought he'd have. She'd brought joy and purpose back into his life. And more than that, she'd brought love. Lucy stared at him for a long moment, then threw her arms around his neck so hard she nearly knocked him over. Yes, she whispered into his shoulder. Yes, yes, yes. Tom hugged her back, feeling tears prick his eyes. Okay then, we'll make it official. You'll be Lucy Bradley. How does that sound? Lucy Bradley, she repeated, testing the name. The next morning, Tom called Beth before Lucy was even awake. I want to adopt her, he said as soon as she answered the phone. Not just foster, adopt. What do I need to do? Beth was quiet for a moment. Tom, adoption is different from fostering. It's permanent. There's no going back. Are you sure you're ready for that? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Okay then, it's going to be a long process. Home studies, court hearings, psychological evaluations. They're going to want to make sure you can handle a child with Lucy's background. And I have to warn you, the system usually prefers to place children with two-parent families. Let them try to find someone who loves her more than I do, Tom said firmly. The paperwork started immediately. Over the next few months, Tom's life was turned upside down in the best possible way. Social workers came to inspect his house. He attended parenting classes where he was usually the only man in a room full of women, learning about childhood development and trauma recovery. He met with psychologists who asked him hundreds of questions about his motivations, his patience level, his plans for Lucy's future. Through it all, Lucy thrived. Tom enrolled her in the local elementary school, where she quickly made friends despite her shy nature. Her teacher, Mrs. Henderson, said Lucy was one of the smartest kids she'd ever taught, and she had a special talent for helping other children who were sad or scared. Lucy started seeing a therapist named Dr. Rodriguez twice a week. At first, she didn't want to talk about her past, but gradually she began opening up. The nightmares became less frequent, and she stopped hoarding food in her room. But the best part was watching Lucy simply be a kid. Tom had never realized how much joy there was in small moments. Lucy's excitement when she lost her first tooth, her pride when she learned to ride the old pony Tom bought at auction, her delight when Buttercup had another foal the following spring. The adoption hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in April, almost 8 months after Tom had found Lucy in his barn. The night before, Lucy was so excited she could barely sit still. What if they say no? She asked for the 100th time as Tom tucked her into bed. They're not going to say no, Tom assured her. Judge Peterson has already read all our paperwork. Beth says it's just a formality now. But what if, Lucy? Tom sat down on her bed and took her small hands in his. Do you remember what you told me about animals not lying? She nodded. Well, I'm not lying either. Tomorrow you're going to become my daughter officially. Not because a judge says so, but because you already are my daughter, in every way that matters. The judge is just going to make the paperwork match what's already true. Lucy smiled, the first truly relaxed smile he'd seen from her all week. I love you, Dad. It was the first time she'd called him Dad instead of Tom, and it nearly broke his heart with happiness. I love you too, kiddo, more than all the stars in the sky. The next morning, Tom put on his best suit, the one he'd worn to Linda's funeral and hadn't touched since. Lucy wore a new blue dress that Beth had helped them pick out, and she carried Mr. Patches for moral support. The courthouse was intimidating, all marble and echoing footsteps, but Judge Peterson turned out to be a kind older woman who smiled warmly at Lucy and asked her gentle questions about school and her animals. Lucy, do you understand what adoption means? The judge asked. It means Tom gets to be my real dad forever, Lucy said confidently, and I get to be a Bradley. And is that what you want? More than anything. Judge Peterson smiled and picked up her gavel. In that case, it's my pleasure to grant this adoption petition. Congratulations, Mr. Bradley. Congratulations, Lucy. You're officially a family. The gavel came down with a satisfying bang, and suddenly Tom was hugging his daughter. His real, legal, forever daughter, while Beth wiped tears from her eyes and the court reporter smiled at them both. Walking out of that courthouse, Tom felt like his life had finally clicked into place. He had a daughter who needed him, who loved him, who'd chosen him just as much as he'd chosen her. The lonely widower who'd been just going through the motions of living was gone, replaced by a father with a purpose and a future full of possibilities. That evening, they celebrated with ice cream and a special dinner of Lucy's favorite foods. As they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Lucy leaning against his side, Tom thought about the morning 8 months ago when he'd found a scared little girl sleeping in his barn. "Dad?" Lucy said quietly. "Yeah, kiddo. I'm glad I picked your barn to sleep in." Tom smiled, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the horses graze in the pasture. Hope was almost full-grown now, strong and beautiful just like her name suggested. Everything about their life felt like a promise of good things to come. Tom Bradley had spent 3 years learning how to live alone. Now he had the rest of his life to learn how to be a father, and he couldn't wait to get started. 2 years had passed since the adoption, and the Bradley Ranch looked completely different. Where there had once been just practical buildings and empty spaces, there were now signs of a little girl's presence everywhere. A tire swing hung from the old oak tree by the house. Colorful wind chimes that Lucy had made in art class danced in the breeze on the front porch. The barn had been painted a cheerful red with white trim, and flower boxes full of sunflowers, Lucy's favorite, brightened every window. Tom stood at the kitchen window, watching 9-year-old Lucy race across the pasture on Buttercup, her long hair streaming behind her like a banner. The mare was gentle and patient with her young rider, understanding somehow that this child was precious cargo. Hope galloped alongside them, now a beautiful 3-year-old horse with a coat that gleamed like copper in the morning sun. "Show off," Tom muttered with a smile, but his heart swelled with pride. Lucy rode like she'd been born to it, which maybe she had been. She certainly had a gift with animals that went beyond anything Tom had ever seen. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Beth Williams, checking in as she did every few months. The formal supervision period had ended a year ago, but Beth had become like family to them. "How's our girl doing?" Beth asked. "See for yourself," Tom said, holding the phone toward the window so Beth could hear Lucy's laughter echoing across the yard. "She's got a riding competition next weekend. First place in her age group 3 times running. That's wonderful. And how are you holding up, Dad?" Tom chuckled. He still got a warm feeling every time someone called him that. "Some days I can't believe she's mine. I keep waiting to wake up and find out it was all a dream." "It's real, Tom. You both made it real." After they hung up, Tom went outside to call Lucy in for breakfast. She was sitting in the pasture now, surrounded by horses and cats, all of them drawn to her like she was some kind of animal magnet. Mr. Patches sat in her lap, still her constant companion, though he was looking pretty worn around the edges these days. "Dad!" Lucy called when she saw him. "Come see what Hope learned." Tom walked over, and Lucy demonstrated how she'd taught Hope to shake hands, or rather, shake hooves. The horse lifted her front leg delicately and placed it in Lucy's outstretched palm. "That's pretty impressive," Tom said. "Think you can teach her to do dishes?" Lucy giggled. "Horses don't have thumbs, Dad, but I bet I could teach her to sort laundry with her mouth." They walked back to the house together, Lucy chattering about her plans for training Hope and her excitement about the upcoming horse show. Tom listened with half his attention while the other half marveled at how normal this all felt now. There had been a time when he couldn't imagine what it would be like to be responsible for another person, especially a child. Now he couldn't. Imagine life without Lucy's constant chatter, her muddy boots by the door, her drawings taped to the refrigerator. The adoption hadn't been without its challenges. There had been difficult days when Lucy's past trauma surfaced unexpectedly. Nightmares that left her crying for her mother, panic attacks triggered by unexpected noises or unfamiliar faces, times when she'd withdraw into herself and become unreachable for hours. But there had been breakthroughs too. The first time Lucy had called him Dad without thinking about it. The day she'd stopped checking the locks on all the doors every night before bed. The morning he'd found her making breakfast for both of them, humming one of Linda's old songs that she'd heard him play on the radio. Dr. Rodriguez said Lucy was one of the most resilient children she'd ever worked with. The therapy sessions had gradually decreased from twice a week to once a month, and now Lucy only saw her when she felt like she needed to talk through something difficult. "Dad," Lucy said as they reached the porch, "can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you think Mama Linda would have liked me?" The question caught Tom off guard. Lucy had been asking more questions about Linda lately, curious about the woman whose pictures filled their house and whose memory was such a big part of Tom's life. "Oh, sweetheart," Tom said, sitting down on the porch steps and pulling Lucy down beside him. "Linda would have absolutely loved you. She always wanted kids, and she would have been so proud of the amazing person you've become." "Really?" "Really. You know what she would have loved most about you? The way you take care of animals. Linda used to say that people who are kind to animals have the best hearts, and you have the kindest heart of anyone I know." Lucy was quiet, for a moment thinking this over. "I wish I could have met her. I wish you could have too, but you know what? I think maybe she had something to do with you finding your way here. Linda always believed things happened for a reason. Like maybe she sent me to take care of you." Tom's throat got tight. "Maybe. Or maybe she sent me you to take care of." Lucy smiled and leaned against his side. "I like that better, because taking care of people is harder than taking care of animals. Animals always tell you what they need, but people sometimes pretend they're okay when they're not." Tom looked down at his daughter, amazed as always by her wisdom. At 9 years old, Lucy had insights that some adults never developed. Her difficult early years had given her an understanding of pain and resilience that made her incredibly empathetic. "Speaking of taking care of people," Tom said, "we should probably get some food into you before you waste away to nothing." Over breakfast, Lucy told him about her latest project, training the barn cats to come when she whistled. She'd already succeeded with 3 of them, and she was convinced the 4th was just being stubborn. "Animals like consistency," she explained seriously, spreading jam on her toast with the concentration of a scientist. "If you're patient, and you do the same thing every day, they learn to trust you. People are kind of the same way." Tom smiled. Lucy had a gift for making profound observations while doing completely ordinary things. It was one of the many ways she'd surprised him over the past 2 years. After breakfast, they drove into town for Lucy's piano lesson. Mrs. Chen, her teacher, said Lucy had natural musical ability to go along with her way with animals. Tom sat in the waiting room, listening to his daughter play a simplified version of Für Elise, and felt that familiar surge of pride and amazement. This was his life now: piano lessons and horse shows, and parent-teacher conferences. Braiding hair and checking homework and explaining why vegetables were important, even though they didn't taste like cookies. It was ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. On the drive home, Lucy was unusually quiet. Tom glanced at her in the rear-view mirror and saw her staring out the window with a thoughtful expression. "Penny for your thoughts, kiddo." "I was just thinking about that first night," she said. "When I slept in the barn with Buttercup. I was so scared and cold, and I thought maybe I was going to die out there." Tom's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Lucy rarely talked about those early days anymore. "But then I woke up and you were there," she continued. "And you didn't yell at me or call me names or try to hurt me. You just wanted to help. You were a little girl who needed help." "Of course I wanted to help." "Not everyone would have, though. Lots of people just walked by when they saw me on the streets, or they told me to go away." Lucy was quiet for a moment. "I used to think maybe there was something wrong with me, like I was broken or bad somehow. But you made me feel like I was worth taking care of." Tom had to pull over. He turned around in his seat to look at Lucy directly. Lucy Elizabeth Bradley, he said firmly, using her full name the way he did when he really wanted her to pay attention. There has never been anything wrong with you. Not then, not now, not ever. You are smart and kind and brave and beautiful. And any adult who couldn't see that wasn't worth your time anyway. Lucy smiled, the kind of smile that lit up her whole face. I know that now. It just took me a while to believe it. That evening, as they did their chores together, Tom reflected on how much their lives had changed. The ranch was thriving in ways it never had before. Lucy's presence had motivated him to fix things up, to make improvements, to think about the future instead of just getting through each day. They'd added 12 chickens at Lucy's request, and she'd convinced him to let her start a small vegetable garden. She sold eggs and vegetables at the farmer's market in town, saving every penny toward a college fund that Tom had secretly already started for her. But more than the physical changes, it was the emotional transformation that amazed him. The house felt alive now, full of laughter and music and the constant presence of someone who cared about him. Lucy worried when he worked too late, celebrated his small victories, and made sure he ate regular meals instead of just grabbing whatever was convenient. She'd saved him as much as he'd saved her, though he'd never tell her that. Children shouldn't have to carry the weight of adult gratitude. As they finished up in the barn, Lucy stopped to give each horse a good-night pat. She saved Hope for last, pressing her forehead against the young mare's neck and whispering something Tom couldn't hear. "What are you telling her?" he asked. "Just that I love her and I'll see her in the morning. Same thing I tell all of them." Lucy straightened up and brushed hay off her jacket. "Mama Linda used to do that with the animals, didn't she?" Tom nodded, surprised Lucy remembered that detail from the stories he'd told her. "Every single night.